Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I'm taking a break from my coverage of the Alliance tournament to talk a little bit about the political situation in the North that is developing into what is likely to be one of the bigger wars in 2017. The narratives here are just starting to be formulated, with the Mittani branding this war a quote-unquote dirty war, and the Pan-Fam coalition attempting to set up a divide between the forces of the North and the forces of the South, in very specific terms for the two mega coalitions. As of yet, the public really has yet to latch on to a specific name for it, so for now I'm just going to refer to it as World War Re, and if a name generally gets brought about for it, I will use that instead. Rather than diving deep on the politics or the narratives, however, today I'm just going to be giving an overview on the forces involved and the very starting actions of the war. And the primary reason for that is because in under 24 hours I will be going to Iceland and preparing for not only my coverage of the Alliance tournament, but also the CSM summit, which take place in consecutive weeks. And without that time to research and talk to people, I really can't make a video that's as unbiased and clear as I want it to be. And even with that, I do feel the need to make at least some disclaimer to the fact that Pandemic Legion did just recently deploy to my home region of Providence, and there may be some sort of subconscious bias against Pandemic Legion before that, so take things with a pinch of salt, I guess. So with that preamble out of the way, let's get right into the meat of things and take a look at not only the map of the game, but also the colour key that I'm going to be using for the majority of this war, unless something crazy happens. The Imperium and Test Alliance are relatively self-explanatory. The extended Pan-Fam is just the Pan-Fam coalition that we talked about in the Spheres of Influence video, alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy coalition, as they are both working together in defense of the North. The DRF are there simply because there's always the threat of intervention from them in any northern or southeasterly war, because they simply border those areas geographically and have large enough forces to make an impact. As of now, they have chosen to remain neutral, but that may change as time goes on. The first major action in this war came as a result of Test Alliance Please Ignore announcing their intention to deploy to the north, with the stated intent of not only getting content in the region, but also getting revenge on perceived betrayals by the Guardians of the Galaxy coalition, and more specifically by its leader, Sword Dragon. The relationship between Sword Dragon and Test Alliance, however, stretches back to way before the Tribute War, which seems to have been the major impetus for this deployment, wherein both Test and CO2 were reset by the Guardians of the Galaxy coalition following Pan-Fam's decision to invade them. In fact, Sword Dragon was once chosen to be the leader of a Test and Pandemic Legion coalition, which was created to rival the CFC, precursor to the modern Imperium, back in 2012. However, after a large amount of political and personal conflict between Sword Dragon and other leaders at the time, which would make a great and undoubtedly controversial video all on its own, Test was effectively dragged into a war and later experienced one of the biggest downswings in its history following the unsuccessful conclusion of it, with them having to retreat to Losec and build themselves back up again, the process of which almost nearly killed the Alliance. Perhaps understandably, this has caused a lot of personal bitterness from older members of Test Alliance Please Ignore towards Sword Dragon himself, as they see him as someone who has effectively dragged the Alliance down from where it stood in its heyday. Still, whatever the reason for the deployment, the move itself was relatively painless, with Test Alliance being able to diplomatically secure a route through DRF space to their new deployment staging of Obi. I have heard from certain sources that the original intent was to deploy to Venal, however this was cancelled following a counter move from the Guardians of the Galaxy coalition back into Venal themselves in order to head off this attempted move. However, Test has vehemently denied this story just as much as the opponents of them have vigorously pushed it. As such, do not take either of these stories as gospel. After a few weeks fighting alone in the north, Test was joined by a second, much larger entity. As the Imperium announced a short-notice State of the Union address, which is an Eisenhowerian-esque political rallying of military forces within the Imperium, where the Mittani declared his intention to go north and pay his enemies back for the damage that was dealt to them during World War B. Following this, a large move-up was held in which the Imperium brought the vast majority of their supercapital fleet to Lone Trek, the low-security space which borders the vast majority of PanFam's holdings in the north. This is notably different from Test's deployment, which eschewed supercapitals in favor of simply bringing enough capitals and subcapitals to create content whilst they were there in the north, belying possible differences between how seriously both entities are taking this overall conflict. It should be noted that so far in World War Re, there seems to be two real different layers developing. The first being the strategic layer, which is based around single points of contention, such as Soitoyos and Fortizars, and the second being the skirmish level, focusing on sovereignty warfare. The former has been the driving force between the major fights that we've seen so far in this war, and is primarily focused around the regions of Tribute and Lone Trek, with Test attempting to support the Imperium's attempts to grab a foothold in Lone Trek and Tribute, whilst the extended PanFam attempts to push them back and stop them from ever being able to bring their capital umbrella into their region. This has also been supplemented by harassing attacks from the Imperium, attempting to reinforce and potentially destroy as many Soitoyos as possible in the north, to disrupt their industrial efforts. This has led to the two major form-ups of the war so far, with the latest in Harkonnen coming to blows. In both of these battles, the attacking forces have lost the strategic objective. On the side of this, harassing Entosis warfare has been used against the Lebensbraum of the extended PanFam, with Pure Blind and Veil of Silent being targeted for extended Entosis ops by both attacking forces. This has led to several extended skirmishes, however, with both sides fielding massed interceptors as the primary doctrine in order to attack and defend Sov. I have a hard time really getting excited about it. Still, as we've seen in previous wars, the real things to look for are iHub timers, as these hold the upgrades that make Sov worthwhile in a strategic sense during wars. As not only are they expensive to replace, they also hold the upgrades that make the space not only worth living in, but also defensible in and of itself, with Sino-jammers and supercapital shipyards requiring upgrades in iHubs to be operational. Beyond all this, however, right now we're in a kind of stalemate, waiting to see what other powers get involved in this war, if any, and whose side they will be on. Especially given the lack of the rest of the Legacy Coalition being involved in the war, given that CO2 has implicated itself with a war with certain minor DRF entities, and also with the potential for the loose cannon that is the Vanguard Coalition to involve itself in this conflict. We also remain in waiting for the first real hammer blow from the Imperium, where they deploy their supercapitals in an offensive action, which, given the sheer level of output that Delve has managed to produce with regards to minerals, should be characteristically overwhelming. Still, I shan't attempt to predict the future anymore, and will leave you with a simple, that's all for now. Take care and fly smart.